Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics on a very special week. We're also glad to be joining everyone at Lincoln Day, the big Republican event held here in St. Louis every year. I want to jump right into it with our guest, the Senate Majority Floor Leader, Senator Mike Kehoe. Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We're timed. There could be no filibuster here. There could be no 6 a.m. night. So let's get right into some issues. The first one being ethics. You've been very outspoken on saying you want these bills to pass. Where are ethics proposals in the process, and which ones do you think will actually become law?
Well, the leadership team in both the House and the Senate has been very clear since, last summer that ethics were going to be a priority in the Missouri House and Senate. The Speaker has done a great job of shepherding through several bills on the House side. Now we have them over in the Senate. We've voted 2 out and sent them back to the House. We've got another one that's still on the floor, which is the lobbyist gift ban. There's a couple more still to go, but I'm very confident that we'll continue to work through the House bills. There'll more than likely be some changes. That's how the process works. And then the House will decide if they want to take up those changes or not. More than likely, the House will ask that we go to conference, which is the next step where various members of both the House and Senate will get together and try to figure out, a path to continue to get these through. But I'm very confident that that we'll be able to get the ethics bills on the governor's desk, meaningful legislation done well before the end of session.
Where do you think ethics legislation should be? Should you be able to become a lobbyist after leaving the House? Do you believe in a gift ban, those types of things?
Well, I always say what passes the smell test. And as you know, I represent a large section of rural Missouri. And I travel all over the state in this job and in some of my previous jobs. And I kind of listen to the coffee shop talk, and that's where you really understand what passes the smell test. And Missourians just don't believe that if they elect somebody that they should just be a elected official one day and then jump out and be a lobbyist the next day. They believe in there should be a certain waiting period. Now the House sent us over something that said you had to serve your term and then wait 1 year. The Senate debated it and just said you had to serve your full term. So the Senate sent back to the House a waiting period, if you will. It just says you have to serve the term that the people elected you to until you can become a lobbyist. So there'll be some point of negotiation, but I definitely believe we need something in there that stops a person, which is what can happen today. I could resign today and become a lobbyist tomorrow. And either version of the House and Senate bills would do that, just they have different lengths of time that would make that possible.
Your district abuts Boone County, where the University of Missouri flagship campus is. This week they fired Melissa Click. It only took 6 months to do something that seemed very common sense. Do you believe that's them trying to establish some sanity and reason and move forward?
Well, the thing I would say it's about time. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous from a guy who's ran a business all of his life. I told one of the university officials a couple of months ago when they came up and said, Senator, if you had somebody in your car business that was a really good employee and, they had a problem, you'd probably counsel them and, you'd try to still keep them. And I said, look, if I had somebody who dented a car's fender on a light pole, I would counsel them. But if they screamed at a customer on the showroom floor, I'd fire him on the spot. And that's what that young man was. He was a customer. He was a student of the university that she screamed at. She should have been fired the next day. And so I'm thankful that they did take the action to answer your question, but there's a kind of a smorgasbord of list of things that people are upset with the university for, and I hope and I think Hank Foley is going to do a great job of trying to get that back on track so we can get back to the conversation that we need to be on. It's a great asset for our students. It's a great asset for our citizens. It turns out a great product. And I hope that we can get back to that conversation.
Of course, they'll tell you that the state and the state legislatures had no input in their decision.
Well, they're going to say that, but I think Missourians have had an input. You see they're down in donations, Absolutely. They're down in enrollment. They're starting to get the message that this is not going to be accepted by Missourians. Let's get the House in order and then get back on track to the good stuff that facility can do.
Let's roll through a few issues you've talked about. Tort reform. The Senate's passed 2 measures they consider tort reform. Do you foresee those actually becoming law this year, or is that more of a long-term strategy to look to next year?
No, I believe the House will be able to get those 2 bills through. The Speaker is as committed as we are to tort. We believe Missouri needs to be a better place to do business for Missouri and Missourians. And both of those measures not only help businesses, but they help the average person as well. Whenever you have excessive tort and litigation going on, the average person pays for that in the form of what we would call insurance premiums many times, especially on these two bills. So being able to keep the court costs down, still allow people to stay in court, but get us a better tort environment is what we're after. That was something we said going into session. I'm happy we have passed two bills out, and I'm confident the House will take them up.
This leads to a question I've wanted to ask you for a while. You're the floor leader of the Senate now. You decide how long the Senate debates a particular bill and where they go to. They took one tort measure at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
You were praised by a lot of quarters for that's how the old Senate worked. That's how the statesmen used to do things. How do you decide we're going to go to 6 a.m. on something, we're going to stop and lay it over, we're going to push this through till it ends, or where a PQ would come in? What goes into your mind in making that determination of how you handle that legislation?
Well, I look at my role is to represent my members of our caucus and what is important to them. And certainly there's very few issues that all 24 of our people will be together, but when it's a majority of our folks, 19, 20, 22 people say, hey, this is really important, we believe this is something that's strong, and we know that leadership in both the House and the Senate believes an issue is strong, we're going to go. And I've told the minority leader that, I live here. I live in Jefferson City. And when I decide we're going to go, it's your right. If you don't want to be moved on the previous question, it's your right to filibuster. But you need to understand, I don't take threats lightly, and we're going to go. When you say you're going to go, we're going to go.
So do you believe you'll have the opportunity to be the floor leader for 3 years? It's pretty long in the term limit era. Do you believe that that's something we'll see this session?
Previous question, you're saying? It's too early to say that. I really do believe in the traditions of the Senate, and I believe in giving everybody their fair time to debate. Certainly, filibuster is a tool that opposing sides can use, and previous questions is a tool that the other side can use. But it's way too early to talk about that, and that's something that I wouldn't just whip out lightly.
Well, what it is time to talk about is the Missouri Republican presidential primary. That's what people are talking about. It is a very unique situation because you're a person that has ran a business. You've ran a company. You're a businessman that went into politics similar to Donald Trump. What is your take on his candidacy and the presidential primary in general?
Well, I'd say Donald Trump's balance sheet is probably a little bit larger than mine, but it's interesting. We've started out with, I think, 17 folks several months ago, and now we're down to 5. We've got Super Tuesday coming up and some other ones. We had a very feisty debate here this week, and that was interesting to watch. I think Missouri is a red state, and so we're going to support the Republican nominee. I'm kind of an ABC. Anybody's better than Clinton. So we need to make sure that we get a good common sense person in the White House that understands our national security needs and understands what it needs to grow the economy. I think there's a couple of candidates in there, at least one, I think, that will do a better job than others. So.
And who's the one you're behind?
Well, I like Marco Rubio. I've said that from way back when he was maybe 7 or 8 down before the first of the year. I think that he represents, I have 4 children, and they're not real excited about trying to figure out who they want to vote for president. 3 of them can vote this year, by the way. And I see them starting to look at him and saying, hey, he looks like somebody who can represent our generation, but has still been around long enough and has the experience to understand how to do the things that need to be done in Washington, D.C. My wife and I feel very strongly about where we're going and where this country's going and where it's going to go for the next decades, not just the next 6 months. And I think Marco's got the ability to pull people together and get that done.
Well, last question. You're a businessman that was successful, that went into politics and has been successful. Give one piece of advice you'd give to a Donald Trump or somebody looking at running for commissioner that going from business to government, give a piece of advice of how they could approach that and be successful in it.
Well, the thing that's very frustrating when you go into politics is it doesn't happen in the time that you're used to it happening in business. When you're in a small business or a large business like Mr. Trump has, you're used to making decisions, and that's the way it goes. In politics, that's not the way it happens. You really need to build coalitions. You need to try to work together on issues to get things across the finish line, because there's just the only way you're going to get things done. And a very polarizing person is not going to be very good at doing that. So we need somebody who is willing to work together to get things done. At the end of the day, you need a decision maker. You need somebody who has experience. I agree with that. But it doesn't happen at the speed that you're used to happening in business. And some days that can be aggravating. So you need to be patient.
Senator Kehoe, thank you for joining us on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Hey, it's great to be on. I really appreciate you having me.
Yep. We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel with all the surrogates from the campaigns from the governor's debate this week held in Jefferson City. But first, we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
So there was a big debate this week in Jefferson City, the first actual debate for the gubernatorial contest. All three longtime Republican candidates showed up, and we have surrogates from all their campaigns here, along with Mark Reardon with KMOX. Very glad to have you back on This Week in Missouri Politics.
It's good to be back, Scott, since you're on my show all the time. I think I kind of guilted you into this just a little bit.
I thought I guilted you into this, so we're in good shape. Nick Maddux with the Hanaway campaign for governor. Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
David Barklage, welcome back with the Brunner campaign.
Yes, sir.
And we have finally Craig Arnzen, the dynamo from Twitter, the sharpest tongue in Southeast Missouri. We're very glad to have you on.
Glad to be here, Scott.
Let's
Thanks
start
for
with
having
you.
me.
Who won the
Sure.
debate?
Well, I think the Missouri voters have good options this summer when they look for a gubernatorial candidate. What they're looking for is somebody who has fought, has delivered, on their issues, and they can trust to beat Chris Koster in the fall and continue to deliver those issues. And I think that's Peter Kinder, and I think it makes it very clear every time that he's in front of those voters.
Nick, you were there in Jeff City. I think one thing that stuck out to me was how hot the room was. I mean, it was packed to the brim with Republicans. If anybody doubts intensity, they shouldn't.
That's for sure, Scott. And I think a lot of people right now are upset with the direction the state has been going. Whether it's been the lawlessness at the University of Missouri, the riots in Ferguson, or just the general ethics debacle in Jeff City, people are upset. And that turnout is why they were there in Jeff City. And I think they're looking for a prosecutor to run for governor who's going to restore law and order and who's going to make Missouri safe and strong. And that's Catherine Hanaway.
David Barklage, why is John Brunner the right guy?
Well, I mean, I think that you're talking about a $27 billion operation. You're talking about a gentleman who has put his life into managing, who has built jobs, who has created jobs, who has turned around a small business to turn it into one of the the largest manufacturer in its area in the country. And I think that kind of management experience, people are tired. I think we're seeing on the presidential level why there's an attraction to Trump. Trump is unscripted and he keeps talking and people believe he's real. They've heard a long time from conservatives, it's about faith, it's about conservative values, whatever. I think American people are fundamentally dissatisfied. They want something real to happen, and I think John Brunner is an outsider and with his experience is the kind of person that can actually manage government. It's not about cutting anymore, it's about managing better. It's not about raising or just cutting taxes, it's about creating more jobs. And I think John Brunner fits that profile. I think all the candidates are good. I think Peter Kinder, Catherine Hanaway, Eric Greitens are all very competent, very good. I think we have an incredible group to choose from who have a lot of diverse experiences. I don't think the voters are going to want in the Republican primary a candidate that doesn't represent a different opportunity depending on who you are.
Mark Reardon, you get to view the race from one of the closest seats in the state at KMOX. Where do you see the race right now and who do you think is leading?
Well, I think that David's assessment is right, and I think that if you have to really talk about who's leading, Peter Kinder is still the prohibitive favorite because of his name recognition. But I think that what you have here is a climate that's different than we've ever had before. And the one thing that I'm disappointed in, and I like all these candidates too, and I know them, we all know them. My concern is, in hearing what I heard at the debate the other night, is I think there's a lot of pandering going on to the voters about cutting taxes and not raising taxes and Obamacare and all that. That's all well and good, but I think people really want to hear ideas, and they're sick and tired of some of the same old things that happen in Washington and in Jefferson City. Look, this is an important time for this state. We're getting our butts kicked in many ways. We have to move it forward. And I think that John Brunner is an interesting choice because he has signed the Becca paychecks, and I think Eric Greitens is an outsider that's attractive as well. And you know that I'm friends with Eric.
Sure.
So I know that I'm not here necessarily as his surrogate, but I think...
Why is he the best choice?
I don't know that he's the best choice, but I think that he's a guy who has led before. Look, I think it's somewhat hypocritical of you, Scott Faughn, who backs Donald Trump, the outsider, the guy who has signed the back of paychecks, to dismiss a guy like Eric Greitens.
Paychecks.
Well, so is Eric Greitens. That's what I meant.
Right?
Well, sure. He was the CEO of The Mission Continues. He's been involved actively for years in that organization. He goes to Fortune 500 companies and he consults. He's a guy that is known for his leadership qualities. So that's why I think he's an attractive candidate. And not only that, I think you have to look at someone. Here's what's important. And this is important at the presidential level, too. You have to look at someone who can beat Chris Koster. So who is that person? That's what the process is all about.
If that was the case, maybe Marco Rubio would be leading. But in a day of people saying they want something real, he's made a very large ideological conversion very quickly as the political climate of Missouri has been expediently to do so.
So is your guy Donald Trump. This is where things are very similar.
I guess
Donald Trump's not a conservative, and all of a sudden conservatives love him, right?
I guess I agree with you now. So we'll both switch together.
I'm glad.
Nick,
I knew that would happen.
Why is a prosecutor better than a business person to run?
Well, look, we've tried the career politician in 2008. They got trounced by Jay Nixon by 500,000 votes. We tried the successful businessman, self-funder, in 2012, got trounced by over 300,000 votes. We need to try something new, and voters are looking to restore law and order in the state. Chris Koster's absence during the protests at the University of Missouri and at the riots in Ferguson was an embarrassment to the state. He hasn't prosecuted anybody for Ferguson, and we need to put somebody in office that's going to do something about that, and that's Catherine Hanaway.
All right, Greg, let me ask you. How is there a contrast between Peter Kinder and Chris Koster? How do you draw that contrast out? They have similar backgrounds. They've been in politics a long time. How are you going to get around Chris Koster's ability to he's a tough candidate, right?
Peter Kinder hides from nothing. No challenge from Chris Koster. No challenge from the inside. You know, in this primary, people talk about being an outsider. The only reason Catherine Hanaway is an outsider, she lost in 2004. John Brunner is an outsider because he lost in the primary in 2012. And Eric Greitens an outsider because he couldn't convince Democrat insiders to let him be their candidate in 2010 for Senate. Peter Kinder is...
Sharpest tongue in Southeast Missouri right there.
Peter Kinder has his job because time and again, he's been able to go to voters and say, I have fought for you, I have delivered for you, and you can trust me to do it another term. And that's exactly what he's done. And that's exactly what he's going to do this fall against liberal, big government, Medicaid expansion, anti-ag Chris Koster.
David Barklage, your candidate's running against a person that's won 3 times. You know, you were right there front and center for those victories. Catherine Hanaway's brought a lot of success to the Republican Party. Eric Greitens may, but John Brunner's ran once and didn't win. How do you counter the argument that Kinder's a winner?
No, you don't. I mean, look, Peter Kinder is a winner. He's won several times. He's done a lot for the party. I don't think it really serves anybody well, and when we have an opportunity to broadcast like this to talk down the other candidates. I think that John Brunner, because of his success, he's independent. I think that's one of the attractions of Donald Trump, that people know he can't be bought. I think it's not really about the ethics, it's about the fact that they feel that special interests are keeping things from getting done. I don't think it's really about necessarily payoffs and things like that we saw of ethics of 20 years ago. I think it's the fact that special interests seem to dominate the ability or block the ability of this country to get anything done. And so in that regard, I think John Brunner, has something that no one else has to bring to the table. Has he been a missionary and has, deep Christian faith? Has he has great business experience, all those things? But the practical thing is that, financially he is capable to take this campaign to the end. It won't run out of gas. And I do think, and we saw that, and Nick could give more of a...
He's going to do that in the general as well if he wants a primary?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Nick gave a generalization, and I don't fault him for this, but David Spence was within 4 or 5 points of Jay Nixon. He could have won. The problem is that David Spence got into negotiations with RGA over money, and RGA didn't put money in for 6 weeks, and Jay Nixon was able to go from 5 points. And here's what's fascinating. Jay Nixon's re-elect was the exact same of Claire McCaskill's. Claire McCaskill had $10 million spent against her. Jay Nixon had not one bad ad, and he was up only 5 points. My point is that 5 weeks allowed Jay Nixon to go from 5 points to 25 points and end up dominating. It wasn't because of who he was running against. If Dave Spence would have put his money up front, he probably could have won. The fact is, Dave Spence wanted to put his money at the end because he did not want to repeat a Kenny Holsoff where the whole ticket would be punched.
Guys, if these races were about money, it would be so clear that Jeb and Hillary were running away to the nominations, but they're not. These races aren't about building this huge machine and making some consultant a lot of money. They're about earning votes and electing the person who's going to do the best job to the office.
Mark Reardon, what is the best argument against Chris Koster? I mean, this is a guy that will have ag support. He's very comfortable off I-70. He was a Republican. What's the best Republican argument to go against him?
Well, I think the alignment with the rest of the party in Missouri, because he's out of touch with the values of Missouri, is probably the best argument against Chris Koster. But let's not be fooled here, and this is why this race is so important for Republicans. He's a very strong candidate. We all know that he's going to be very difficult to beat. Now, I think because of the climate that we're in right now and what's happening at the national level, that puts this in play. If we were sitting here a year ago, I think I even did say, Scott, that I don't think Chris Koster is beatable in this race. I disagree with that now. I think he is. I think he's vulnerable.
Is it because of the national climate?
I think it is. I also think because of the challenges in Missouri. I also think that Chris Koster's sitting back and sort of waiting things, and this may be an advantage to him, waiting for things to happen while all these Republicans are fighting it out. I don't know how that's going to work itself out in the end, if that will be something that favors Republicans or not. That's why I'd like to see this campaign maybe focus a little bit more on ideas instead of just going back and forth, because people want to hear what the vision is from these candidates.
Do they, or do they vote on
let me just
attacks
say,
and wins?
Look, can I say this, is that I think Mark is dead on. I'm not pandering to you. But the fact is that we see it in the national campaign, that this is not a traditional year. The middle class has been just devastated by health care, education costs. The middle class has probably shrunk. 3/4 middle class has probably moved down because of income, because of lost jobs and things like that. There is huge stress factors out there. On the Democrat side, your Ferguson is just the tip of the iceberg. The Black Lives Matter is going to dominate the Democrat side. In fact, I think it's dominate the presidential campaign. The point is that people are looking for real answers. They want a candid conversation, and they want these guys to talk about it. And I think that we can go back to 1992, where we had name calling, we had Roy Blunt and Bill Webster literally destroy the party, or we can have a constructive dialogue of people showing up at debates. I've never seen so many debates, and again, candidates participating in the debates and having those issues and focusing on that, I think will do more to build the party and to really give credibility back to the Republican Party. We need to quit talking about the personalities and focus in on difference on issues.
One thing I noticed, though, is 2 things from the debate. One, your communications director has some pipes on him. I mean, he can make noise. And 2, Catherine Hanaway had no problem delivering attacks. And I think some people wondered after the events of last year if she would be able to be the aggressive candidate that some people knew her to be. But she came ready to go. She delivered some of the best hits on Koster of the entire night.
Yeah, I think Catherine is definitely committed in this primary to making it a campaign of ideas. We've put out plenty of white papers on workforce development, on how we make Missouri safer again, and we've got more in the pipe.
She was able to tie those into attacks on Coster and Nixon. I thought that was something that stood out to me.
Yeah, for sure. And you're still, when we get to the general election, you're going to see more of that from her, for sure.
Great, let's talk for just 1 second. I mean, the gang that just can't shoot straight. Missouri, the statewide Missouri Republicans. I mean, honestly, I think you could say that Missouri statewide Republicans are to winning statewide elections as the Chicago Cubs are to winning World Series. It's just embarrassing.
Brutal.
Hasn't been that long.
This week they had another breakdown.
Sure.
How does the state party organize a statewide? I mean, they can't stop you from running, but what do you do to, as a state, not the actual party, but collectively, to get the house in order?
We have a lot of people in the state who make a living finding primaries on the Republican side. None of those are employed by our campaign. What we did this year, and I think many campaigns could take the lead of, is this summer rebuilt our campaign from scratch. It was built around moving in a 2016 environment. It wasn't something from 2004 or 8 that was rehashed for this round. We move quick, we move nimbly, we're good stewards of the dollars that our funders or our donors bring to us.
Would you say every dollar counts?
Every dollar counts. And Scott, you look at candidates who know how to win. Peter Kinder won in 2004 when nobody else won. Peter Kinder he won in 2008 when nobody else won, in 2012 when nobody else won. You have a guy that knows that it takes a lot of work. You've got to go see voters. You've got to go to an event in McDonald County. You've got to go to Schuyler County, or you've got to be in Greenville at the Wayne County at their events. You find candidates who can
promotion of noting the fact that those 3 campaigns he won were all run by myself. So I think we're taking that into the John Brunner model.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But by the way, just note something that is, I think one thing we all 3 agree on is that whoever this governor is, they need to do a lot for Southeast Missouri.
I think that's clear.
You all agree with that?
Absolutely.
Or Southeast Missouri, as Mark Reardon would say it.
No,
Mark,
I would not say Missouri.
we saw another chapter in the comedic just tragedy that is statewide Republican electoral campaigns. Senator Brown rescinded his endorsement and filed against Eric Schmidt for treasurer. You have primaries all up and down the list. People say this is good for the party. Is there any way they're being serious?
You mean serious in their candidacy or serious?
It's good to we have all these primaries. It's good we spend all this money.
Well, I think that in a situation, look, Eric Schmidt's going to be the heavy favorite. I don't think he's going to be damaged by this at all. And I think it is going to just help consultants and people that are on the payroll. So I think a lot of this will work itself out. I think the Republicans are positioned pretty well for these statewide races this year. But you got to be strong at the top of the ticket, and you have to be focused.
If you had to predict today, who wins the GOP primary for governor?
Well, I mean, if I'm predicting today and I'm putting smart money on something, it's Peter Kinder. But let's not forget that 6 months ago, I would not have put money on Donald Trump to win the presidential race.
So you're with Brunner like me. That's 2 votes for Brunner.
These things are not set in stone. I mean, I'd say Kinder just because he's the best known candidate in Missouri right now.
Maddux, quick prediction. Who wins the presidential primary in Missouri?
Right now I think if it's today, it'd be Trump. We'll have to see what happens later down the road in the next 2 weeks.
Quick prediction. Who wins the presidential primary in the state?
I'm with Nick. I think Trump's out front right now, but there's a lot of time on the clock.
Who wins it?
Trump.
Cool. Thank all you guys for being here.
Trump, by the way. You didn't ask me that question.
Well, I didn't know if you could say it out of your mouth. I didn't know you could form the words. I want to thank all you guys for being here. I want to thank everybody watching at home and on Lincoln Days. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you in part by Sterling Bank.